Hey guys, it's Chris and Colin in the morning. We are back to talk to you about some more mental health and talk about our emotions. We love talking about our emotions, so we're here.
We are here. We're full of emotions.
So many emotions. So today, we really want to talk about self care. It's like a really important part of our lives, and we want to kind of give you guys some like tips on like what we found to be true. But like we mentioned in previous episodes, mindfulness and being like aware of where we are right now is an important part of any self-care strategy. So I'm gonna like put Colin on the spot. Colin, how are you feeling right now? How's your body feeling right now?
My body anxious. Maybe you guys don't know this. I still get anxious when we get on the camera sometimes when we do podcasts. By therapeutic, strategies are kind of to do whatever I want to do anyway while I'm anxious and put myself in those positions. So, over time it doesn't hinder me from doing the things I want to do. But yeah, I'll say anxious and sleepy.
I agree with you on sleepy there. What do you need right now, like physically?
Based on what my body's telling me, to sleep more, probably. And the anxiety one is tricky for me because, again, my journey is to kind of put myself in those positions and kind of to build up that tolerance so I can be empowered to do what I want to do. However, I do need to regularly check in, because if it's too much, if it's I can't handle it, then that's not a help either. So kind of always trying to be aware of when I need to actually soothe and make sure I can manage it and when I can't. So but I would say sleep for sure is an easy answer to that.
Okay. Like I can identify with that too, because I'm feeling the same way you are right now. Like I'm feeling like very tense in my body and kind of just like hyper sensitive. I've been hypersensitive for a few days now, so like emotionally I know like I'm just like overstimulated. It tells me that I'm probably confused or having like some past stuff come up, and when that happens I notice I tend to be like more irritable and reactive to people, and I kind of agree with you about well, it's good to like push ourselves to get outside of our comfort zones and say yes and do all that kind of stuff. Like if I do it too much, like to be honest, like that bitchiness like really comes out in me.
Yeah, it's kind of a hard line to know, and sometimes I think you're gonna fail at that. Sometimes you're gonna make the wrong decision. I really want to push myself, and then you do it, and then it's too much. So that's why I think kind of being aware, or at least trying to in the moment, being intentional about when you choose to push yourself and not is good. So
Definitely.
Right now I feel like this is a manageable anxiety for me, which is why I'm doing the podcast, why I continue to do the podcast. But sometimes afterwards I just need to go home and just do nothing and take a bath and just chill, so
my favorite thing to do honestly is binge watch TV sometimes, because we spend all day talking to people, and the last thing I want to do is hear the sound of my own voice at the end of the day. And I don't know, I feel like we talked about in previous podcasts, but the idea that anxiety just has been a really powerful component of self-care for me, learning that it's energy, right? You can't create or destroy energy, you can just turn it into something else. And so my anxiety is going to be there, it's very existential, but how do I channel that into something productive?
Yeah, like we mentioned before, anxiety it's normal, right? It's just a emotion that you feel and you're never going to get rid of it. So that's why, as we've talked before, as I share often, I'm into more acceptance strategies rather than always trying to control your anxiety. But especially, you're working and stuff. Yeah, I remember you get off from work, all you want to do is just sit down, not talk to anybody, and just watch TV, mix that with grad school and life and stuff. So that's okay too. Like we say, it's or at least I say, it's a balance. So
I feel an important part that we're talking about here is values. Incorporating our values into self-care. Sometimes I am anxious and overwhelmed, but I made a promise to myself to treat grad school differently than I did for undergrad, right? And so sometimes that's pushing through that exhaustion, or saying yes to going out with our friends when I could easily just be like, oh, I'm just gonna watch TV, right? Like it's like instinctually might not be my first reaction, but I've come to learn that like we can't just react on impulse and instinct. Right? Like I put some thought into it.
I think that's like the key to this kind of I don't know, way of thinking or therapeutic kind of approach, because with the feelings part, if that's just your motivation, then yeah, you're just going to be doing, you know, what you feel at the time. You're never going to really do that pushing. So that's why values kind of like has to be the motivation there. You know, to help you try to keep that balance, I think it's just important to be aware of like, what are my values? What are the things that I really want to pursue in life? I'm not always going to feel like doing those things. Like sometimes my anxiety is not going to want me to talk to that person that I really want to talk to go to that social event that I've been wanting to do, to kind of choose this risk that might have this thing that I want, but you know, might not work out, interviewing for a job, whatever. We're not always going to feel like doing that all the time. So kind of approaching it like following your values and accepting that anxiety, like we talked about, it's just going to be there. It's a normal thing. I think that's kind of how you kind of take that approach.
Well, and that acceptance piece is important because like there's less struggle, right? If I'm giving up this resistance and this struggle, like I'm in this place of acceptance, it's going to make the things that I need to do way more tolerable.
Mm-hmm.
You know, it's like really about perspective, and that ties into that mindfulness thing. Like if I have the right perspective on something, like for example, we're in grad school, right? Like a lot of people don't get that privilege, right? So I try to remind myself like this is a privilege of what we're getting to do. Not, oh my god, I have to go to school. Like yeah, it's tiring, right? But we get to do it, and so like having that shift in perspective can be really helpful too, for me at least.
Absolutely, yeah. There's some times where we have all that homework, and I feel like this is the worst thing ever, and then it helps to remind ourselves sometimes that hey, we're in a pretty cool space and opportunity. You know, that we both worked hard for. So completely with you there.
Is there since we're talking about all of this, like feelings, we love talking about our feelings, right? And
so many feelings.
Spoiler alert, guys, we're going to talk about how we suck as men at self-care. We'll talk about that in a minute.
Love talking about that.
We love talking about how we need to do better, guys. We just do. But where's your energy at like now from when we started this conversation?
Honestly, now I can get into another theory here. I don't feel as anxious. I feel like more kind of like excited and like I feel like my drive is up because I love talking about these things. And it's such a huge part of like, I don't know, it's just my passion for one, but also just my like life journey. And kind of coming into my own person was like learning a lot of this and implementing a lot of this.
Yeah.
So now I kind of feel like I've shifted from the threat phase of like my being to the drive phase, which is another theory I learned about in undergrad. But so now I'm kind of like into this and having fun and stuff like that. So that's where I'm at now.
It's so interesting how we can like shift from that fight or flight mode into something that's actually productive and being able to recognize that. I think a lot of people don't even get, like, see, I keep going back to this opportunity thing. We get the opportunity to recognize like when we're in a fight or flight response.
Yeah.
And a lot of the people don't.
That awareness part, but also it brings me back to sometimes you really got to put yourself into that threat phase a little bit, the initial, because at first, you know, I'm feeling like anxious to do this, and then like I get into it and I'm still anxious, and then we finally talk and it kind of morphs into the drive phase. So I kind of, you know, used exposure a little bit to you know, wouldn't have happened if I like listened to my anxiety and was like, oh no, this is anxious, like, you know, anxiety provoking, I don't want to do this. So
it's a motivator.
Yeah.
Like I feel motivated too, and I feel like I'm connecting with you on this because it's like learning to trust ourselves. Even though it's uncomfortable, even though it's anxious, like, and that's again like self-care. Like a big part of self-care is like trusting our gut and like listening to our instincts and actually like doing the things we need to do. We say adulting like it's a scary word, right? Especially us millennials or whatever, but you know, and it's so funny, like there's so many jokes and so many memes, but like really what it is, it's just like taking care of the things we need to take care of at the end of the day.
Yeah, it's kind of learning that discipline a little bit. I mean, that's a huge thing that I had to kind of, at least that's a huge part of my growth, is very little discipline earlier in life, and then now I'm continuing in that phase of like trying to build that, which again just takes repetition and stepping into it and stuff like that. So, but yeah, that awareness part of also just being in tune to where you're at, because again, you don't want to go too far. You don't want to burn yourself out, because then only negatives kind of happen from there. So, hey guys, so one thing we didn't touch on last time is that there can be another component to like what we need in terms of self-care. We wanted to touch on like socially and spiritually. You know, what kind of self-care do you need with those topics? So I'm gonna kick that one off to you. What do you think that is for you, Chris?
Gosh, well, I mean, socially, so like I've definitely been called like a extroverted introvert or introverted extrovert, whatever. Like where I like definitely thrive and get energy from social connections, but also, you know, equally need my alone time. And what I'll say is that I have come to value my alone time a lot more than I used to. When I was abusing drugs before I was sober, I couldn't stand being alone. And so that was a pretty pivotal moment in my recovery, was like learning to be alone and recognizing like, hey, this is an important time for like me, like date yourself, kind of thing. But at the same time, like, I believe we're social creatures and we need people around us. And like, as smart as I may think I am, I'm never going to be objective about myself. And I need like good social supports, like good friends around me that I can like get feedback from. And so part of self-care for me is actually having those trusted people. Trust is important, that I can go to either for advice or to vent. Because sometimes I don't like want advice. I'm a verbal processor. I just need to hear myself say it out loud, like, and realize if my idea is like really stupid or not, you know. And spiritually, like, spirituality is part of my recovery, but I don't think I need anything in that right now. It's always there, you know. But what about you? What do you need socially?
I feel like I could go two different ways with this. So there's like my inner social like kind of network, and then I kind of view it from a society perspective. I feel like there's so many things we could use socially to help us. You know, I could get on a whole soapbox about how we're socialized and you know, the systems that kind of influence us. I think there's a lot of changes that could be made there. Growing up, it would have been really nice if I had, you know, maybe a culture that showed more acceptable like male kind of expression of being, you know, not like growing up in this well, just in America for one, but also in the sports culture and stuff like that. I feel like I was only shown one way, that alpha male type way, that like that's what I should strive to be like valuable as a person. So I feel like socially there could be changes there that would help people maybe not need so much self-care. But what I can do, I guess, is the other way. And yeah, so for you, it was kind of like building a supportive community.
Yeah.
Keeping a supportive community. For me, I feel like it's boundaries. Like,
can't argue with that.
Yeah. I feel like I have a lot of good people in my life. I feel like I have a huge drive to connect with people. I never feel like more fulfilled than when I'm doing that. But that almost can be like a problem and if I don't have boundaries, because I'll put that before everything else in my life, like, you know, and then like I might start putting that or people first, or like you know, maybe someone's needing something from me in that moment, but I really need to, you know, take care of myself or do the assignment I need to do, or some kind of, you know, other obligation, and that won't always be the easiest thing for me to balance. I'll try to do both, or I'll put one before the other. So boundaries is a big one for me socially, for self-care. And spiritually, for me, that's still kind of an unknown. And honestly, for me, I think what was helpful for me was to accept that it's an unknown for me. Just kind of an approach of like, hey, I believe there's something out there that's more, but I don't know what it is, and I don't know, you know, there's, I don't know, so just kind of accepting that uncertainty, I guess, in that sense, and try to find a kind of more existential, as you know, where I kind of try to just create my own meaning, follow my values like we talked before. So that's what I would say for spiritual.
Yeah, it makes sense. Like I like to think of spirituality as like limitless, and we shouldn't like limit ourselves.
Mm-hmm.
You know, I'm really glad you mentioned boundaries. Like I feel like I should have said that. I think one of the most important things that I learned was like the difference between internal and external boundaries too. Like the external boundaries, right? They're like what you can give me and like tell me like what kind of behavior you wouldn't accept from me. But like my internal boundaries are like those inner rules I have for myself where I'm not allowed people to treat me a certain way, right? And I noticed that like that's very much connected to like if I'm engaged in really good different types of self-care, I tend to have stronger internal boundaries, right? So I think that can be a red flag for me is like, am I letting my boundaries go? What's going on with me otherwise? So I'm really glad you mentioned that.
Actually, I'm glad you mentioned that. I haven't heard of that before. The internal versus external boundaries. That's an interesting point. But I like how you tied it back to self-care. Like, you know, like when I'm having self-care, I'm having like better internal boundaries, like that kind of thing. So,
you know, it's helpful. I agree with what you said. Like culturally, the cultural paradigms of what it means to be a man, like we just don't understand what self-care is. And guys, if you feel like you can't understand what self-care is, you're not alone. We were like made to be this way.
Well, I feel like, yeah, I feel like you kind of grow up thinking like you don't need self-care, or the idea that you are in a place where like self-care is necessary. That's not really socialized in your mind.
No.
At least for me, it was socialized that you're always supposed to handle things. You're always supposed to push through. You know, you're supposed to be like the strongest person, and if you can't, like if you fail or struggle in any way, you're a pussy, you're weak or something
bitch.
like that. Yeah. You're gay is what people would most would say. And so yeah, it kind of like self-care is almost a new concept, I feel like, for me, and it kind of sounds like for you too.
Yeah.
Where it's like, oh yeah, it's okay to admit my vulnerabilities and admit I need some help. I need to actually put some time into like making sure I'm okay. And yeah, that's I mean, like I'm on this journey for years now, but that would be completely different between like myself in high school versus like myself when I was trying to like, you know, kind of deconstruct everything. So
oh yeah, I feel like that journey for me started definitely like when I got into recovery, and like you're required to be all like emotionally vulnerable, and it's so weird at first, and you're like, how is this going to help me be sober? And it just like doesn't make sense, but you do it, and then I don't know, it's like you just try it and it works.
Yeah.
You know, but it seemed really foreign to me to like tell another dude, especially one that wasn't related to me, all these like feelings. And I can remember like crying in front of my sponsor and getting hugs by him, and like those were really pivotal moments in my recovery where I was like, oh wow, it's like okay to like be emotional, and like you'll get positive feedback for it. You know, it's not this negativity like grow up, stop crying kind of shit. You know. But like now that I mentioned AA, like that's been a big like active self-care strategy for me, right? And so like if you guys don't know, like active means it's the hard stuff we're doing as part of our self-care strategy to like better ourselves. And so for me, that's been like AA and therapy, right? Like it is work that I have to do to one, stay sober, because if I can't stay sober, I certainly wouldn't have a job or school or anything like that. And then therapy to treat all the stuff that, you know, AA doesn't treat and it's not supposed to treat. So that's like an active strategy for me. It's like doing that hard stuff to take care of myself so that I can show up for other people. Like what's something you do?
Active for me, definitely therapy.
Gotta love therapy.
Yeah, definitely therapy. That's kind of where it started, to be honest. And then also what I do, I really tried to, because of therapy, this was like a therapeutic, inspired by therapy, I guess. I really commit to the things like I want to do just daily in you know, in my day, my life. I try to live a life that, you know, I want to live. I want to do the things that I want to do. Again, values over feelings. Even if I don't feel like it, you know, I try to kind of learn that discipline and commit myself to just building those habits. So I work out every day, at least when I have the time to, which is most days, probably like five days a week. I study every day. Every day I have like a certain productive goal that I want to do, whether that be a chore here or some kind of like maybe an appointment I have to set up there. I try to do something every day. In addition to my studying, I also have like an assignment or reading or something I want to do every day. So I just try to do those every single day to kind of build that foundation and like that, those habits where I'm like living the life I want to live. I don't want to go like, because for me it's easy to just go days of not doing anything because I don't feel like it. So I try to just have those kind of set things where I'm like, I'm going to make time for this every day. And all of those are kind of around self-care. You know, I want to get something done for me. I want to take care of myself physically. So, yeah.
Yeah, no, that makes sense.
And then I also want to give like time for me to do something I enjoy as well. That'd be another thing to me. That's another active thing that I do where it's like, okay, but here during this period of time, I'm going to play video games with my sister and my dad, or I'm going to play basketball, or I'm going to hang out with whoever. So, yeah.
Like, I feel like those are all intentional acts, right? That's what we're talking about with active self-care is they're intentional, right? They're things we need to do. So even if it's playing video games with our family, which I do too, that's an intentional act of bonding.
Absolutely.
Right, with our family. And like, I feel like we got to hit all the key points. Like the second you said gym, I was like, that is an area I am lacking in my life right now. And I make, that's been an important part of my self-care strategy in the past. When I'm working out, I have increased body positivity, right? Because guys, we can have body image issues too. And I just feel more emotionally regulated, right? And so that's one area I'm lacking in. But I'm so glad that we like are able to talk about like the importance of active self-care. I think we assume that what self-care is what we would consider passive self-care, right? It's like treat yourself, right? Like do the fun splurge, spend the money, like do the impulsive thing, which are all good, right? DBT teaches us that healthy rebellion, like putting our impulses into like non-destructive things, can be good, but that's still passive self-care. It's because it's like not what you're talking about, which is like that intentionality.
God, I'm like over here like making faces because I think that's such a good point. The like self-care not necessarily being like indulgence.
Ooh, it's good.
Yeah, and well, it even kind of brought what kind of came up to mind when you were talking about working out. I think it's like sometimes important to be aware of like your motivations behind like whatever self-care. Yeah. So because sometimes working out for me, I even still question sometimes like, do I really want to do this, or is this like a male like socialized? I'm trying to be like the strong, sexy guy, or is it more about what I try to make it more about is just like being healthy and like taking care of my body. And stuff, because there's a lot of times I'm just sitting on the couch eating bad food because we're busy. But
that's where that balance piece comes in. Like, it's okay to like want to look good as long as you're also doing it for your physical health, right? Like, it's having that really balanced place in ourselves.
Absolutely. But then like as you were mentioning, in other ways, like sometimes I think we do think self-care is like, I'm going to splurge on this thing. I'm going to pursue this thing that makes me feel good, but like we said before, values over feelings. Feeling good is not always self-care. Like if it's something unhealthy, if it's drugs, if it's seeking out validation and people like for the wrong reasons, I guess, or just kind of doing impulsive or unhealthy things for that reason.
That's self-soothing.
Yeah, I'm like talking about myself with that one. That
was
a little bit more detailed, but
it's fine. I'm thinking about myself and smoking and how like I'm like, that's self-care. It's like, no, that's self-soothing.
Exactly. Yeah. So great point. So it's stuff like that. Again, it's being aware. It's balance. That's why I do like active self-care. It's like I'm going to do these things, and some of them some things were like I'm going to do my homework. I'm going to do a chore, but and then I'm going to intentionally do something that I enjoy, but also I care about, playing video games with my family. I want to like have a relationship with my family. I want to experience them and stuff. That's something that feels good, but that's also like driven by my values, I want to spend time with my family. I want to have some time to relax. And where if I was like, I'm going to play video games 8 hours today because I just like self-care, then maybe that's not as healthy. Of course, I do that sometimes still, but
It's fine in moderation, right?
Yeah, but if it's on a Monday before a class and like and I still have homework to do and stuff, maybe that's not like self-care.
I mean, I agree with you, man. Like, it's the intentionality is what matters. What's my motive? That's been like drilled into my head ever since I got sober. What's your motive? What's the story you're telling yourself about this? Are you telling yourself this is self-care when it's not, or is it actually? And so, like, for me, like, going to the theater is actually a form of active self-care. And people are like, well, that's really self-indulgent, or like, it's like, no, like, I grew up loving theater, doing theater.
Yeah.
It connects me to like happy parts of my childhood. It emotionally regulates me. It's something I get to do and take a friend or a family member with me, so it's like intentional time. And I got those things by getting a journalism degree and like getting press credentials, right? And so that's a gift I want to continue to give myself and other people.
Yeah. It's quality time with people, and it's something you're passionate about.
Yeah.
And that's the thing. I don't think there's any like right or wrong answer, like or right or what would be indulgent for one or value for another. Like, it really depends. And also, it's okay to be indulgent sometimes. I just think that it's again about balance, because it can be a negative thing. But yeah. So just what you're saying, that sounds like a big value. It sounds like a value. And something that brings joy in your life, and some like an experience that you want to experience, that's not just driven by like your feelings, like I just want to avoid this pain or something like that.
Well, and those of you who are like, what the hell are values? It took me a long time to figure out what even some of my values were.
It's still something I question sometimes. Yeah.
Trial and error. Like, we got to go do these things that we're supposed to do that are uncomfortable, get outside of our comfort zone, all the things we've been talking about. Like, that's how you identify your values.
My therapist says make a choice sometimes. Like, I love what you said about trial and error, because sometimes you have conflicting values. Sometimes you don't know what your values are. Yep. My therapist says make a choice and live with it. So, and then you'll probably learn after that. But sometimes, maybe not. But yeah, it's empowering. Chris, another term that was brought to me that I'm not even, you've kind of explained to me a little bit off camera, so I know a little bit more now. But I didn't even know what this meant, and I'm curious what you can tell us about minimize habits. Well, no, sorry. Minimize our habits.
Yeah, I took a look and thought about that a lot. Like, what minimizing to me, like, what do I do to make myself smaller, right? And that feels very like limiting when I make myself smaller, like, so I'm not an inconvenience. And so this situation came up for me at work. I say yes a lot at work. I take pride in doing my job well. I believe like good employees like say yes. That's how you build opportunities and growth, right? And so like I'm kind of my boss's go-to person when like a group needs to be covered last minute, something needs to be come up, and I really like being busy at work, so I usually don't mind. However, one of my coworkers recently quit, and so I've absorbed her group. So I've gone from when I started from 0 groups to 4 2-hour groups a week, in addition to all my other duties, and I'm also doing assessments, managing my own caseload, like well beyond the job description, right? And my boss asked me to do a 5th group with like an hour's notice this weekend. Normally I would have said yes, but this time I said no. And so saying yes, I feel like in that situation would have minimized me, because I recognized that I was feeling momentary burnout for the week. Like, I had done all these groups the days prior, like I had done all these things, and I just didn't have it in me to give like what I felt was like a quality group to the patients. And so I said no. And again, normally I would say yes, right? Because when you say yes, there's opportunity and choice. But recognizing that my own need in that moment was the priority, right? So I chose to use my voice, right? And when I use my voice, I tend to not minimize myself. So to me, that's what it is, using my voice.
Okay, yeah, for you, it was kind of like the boundaries that we were talking about before, and like having that balance between you want to be the guy that is reliable and does a good job, but at the same time, then maybe you're the go-to person for that, and maybe someone can that can get a little bit taken advantage of in some cases, consciously or not. I relate to that actually. In my past job, I feel like the same thing. I always wanted to be like reliable and taking on these things. In fact, part of my therapeutic process, my therapist would say, like, step into the discomfort, like say yes to things, like talk to those difficult clients.
Literally heard that too. Yeah.
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 And I actually did think it really helped. It did really help. But what the important part, again, I think, is the balance part. You're already doing 4 groups. You are stepping into that.
Yeah.
You are kind of pulling your weight there already. So for you, it was, you kind of needed to, like, it would have been too much if you took another group. Like, that's kind of that staying aware
Using
of
your
what you can manage.
Yeah, I mean, the ability to use my voice is powerful, but when we use our voices, there can be consequences is the word that's coming to mind, but that's not quite what I intend. But like, yeah, like using our voice, and not everyone may. We don't know how that's gonna like come across, right?
It's scary.
It's scary, right? Fear of the unknown, right? And that's what fear is. It's like I am anticipating something bad happening. I don't know what it is. Right? I fear this. I'm gonna have a terrible outcome, but I said no. My boss was like, "Oh yeah, no problem." Right?
Sometimes it's so easy, and it's like we have all that fear beforehand. Yeah, I'm gonna keep my example to work too, because it took me about 1.5 years to feel comfortable working at where I did in the residential unit. Maybe 2 years before I felt comfortable actually like voicing to administration and to my coworkers. And man, when I did, I felt very empowered.
Feels good.
Yes, well, it does. But also, you feel like, yeah, you feel like a more self-actualized person. Even like I just felt like, I don't know, like I was confident enough, I guess, to like kind of fight for the change that I thought I needed to see. So I would like bring up issues to administration, things that I thought could help client care.
Your voice matters.
Yeah, you feel like that. And you feel like you kind of are maybe encouraging others to do the same, because I don't know about you, but in a lot of our staff meetings, like so many people, you could just feel we maybe all had the same issue. We maybe would talk about it like outside of the meetings, but when it would come to the meetings, no one wanted to say anything because it's just, you don't want to step on any toes. But kind of
it's part of advocacy though,
yeah, finding that like empowerment to use your voice, like you said, and advocate for that can really help, because I think it helps people like see different perspectives. It can help like you gain ideas, and it can ultimately help client care. But what we're talking about also can help you feel better, and like because I think there's a stress that comes with like you're like holding that back.
Yeah. It can
constantly.
affect you.
So yeah.
Yeah.
Okay, so minimize your habits.
Yeah. Hopefully that makes sense, guys. It's just any situation where you feel like you're making yourself smaller, right? And when you make yourself smaller, you're kind of sacrificing some of your values, perhaps boundaries, and again, those are important pieces of self-care. And so the last thing we want to talk about with you guys is a self-care flow chart, and it doesn't need to look like a flow chart, right? But it's sort of like a self-care plan, and it starts with what we were talking about. It starts with identifying your values, right? Colin and I both mentioned that like we got to know like what we stand for in order to go after what we want.
Yeah. Well, for me, I'll say my plan, we kind of mentioned a little bit. I try to have somewhat of a structured schedule, but to intentionally like give myself time to not be structured, kind of. So every day I wake up, my plan is to eat, like kind of like brush my teeth, do all that stuff, then go to the gym. Do that I just do it for like 45 minutes to an hour. I just try to do it consistently, but I try to do some stuff that I can manage. Then I either go to class or I come back and I do homework, and just have my intentional time for that. And then I try to do one productive thing a day. I did like.
That's a good rule.
Yeah, I just try just one so I can build that habit. Obviously, if I need to do more things, I'll do it, but I try to do at least one a day, and then I have some intentional time where I do something that I want to do, that's something that I like experiencing, Then I try to go to bed at the same time every night. Right now, that is very late, and will change once we get into our like internships and stuff. But I try to go to bed at the same time every night. I try to have a good amount of sleep every night. So that's my active plan. I also go to therapy every other week. When I need to, I switch it up to every week. And I'm trying to think of something maybe new I can add from this conversation. Oh, I got one for you. What you said about using your voice and kind of we have been talking about like stepping into discomfort sometimes for the motivation of your values. And this is something my therapist talks to me about, is to actually seek out something that makes you uncomfortable.
Ooh, I like that.
And obviously you want it to be motivated by your values, something you care about. But I kind of like the idea of one thing I do every day where I'm intentionally seeking out something that I care about that makes me uncomfortable.
Getting outside your comfort zone.
Yeah.
I like that. Yeah, I guess for my self-care flow chart, my days are already so structured, so it's about just continuing to do those things even when I'm tired, right? So I'm actually really good about going to bed and waking up at the same time. I go to bed at like 11, I get up like between 6 and 7 naturally, because I guess when we get older, our bodies just don't need alarm clocks anymore.
Yeah, true.
But part of my self-care is getting that rest so that I can show up and do my job well and do school well. I do therapy every week. I go to an AA meeting every week. And I also set aside at least one day on the weekend doing either nothing or a bunch of social stuff, just like nothing school or work related. I feel like having that intentional time as part of my self-care strategy is really important. And like that's when I give myself permission to play a little bit, be a little bit impulsive or engage in healthy rebellion.
It's like a recharge.
It is a recharge because, I mean, I spent a good portion of my 20s in active addiction, so there is a part of me that likes excitement. So I've found other strategies, getting tattoos, for example, healthy rebellion to kind of get that need met, to get that itch scratched. But yeah, I like yours about doing something intentional every day that makes me uncomfortable to help me grow. I think I'm gonna try that one too. But yeah, beyond that, like my self-care strategy is really like active right now because I'm really a big advocate for like being engaged in therapy and being engaged in my cyber community, being engaged in school, which I mean, honestly, we could even argue that's a self-care activity because it's in alignment with like building our goals and our motivation and our what we want out of our life.
Yeah, you know? For me, it actually is a big one, and you know, and I'm not trying to get on like any kind of soapbox or something. It's totally cool if that's a stressor. It's a stressor for me too, but this is like my passion. So I'm like actually,
it's good stress.
Yeah, it's like I do feel like I'm doing what I want to do, and I'm kind of like putting myself through the path I want to get that goal. So yeah, I feel like pursuing your passions is a self-care thing. Like, absolutely. You know, I wouldn't be feeling the same way if I was in a business school right now. Then that would just be stress. Like I wouldn't be passionate about that. But yeah, so kind of like pursuing your dreams, I think that's like maybe the ultimate self-care.
The echelon of self-care.
Yeah, the pinnacle.
And hey, you know what? Tonight we are actually going to go do some passive self-care. We're going to go do a party, right? Because that's important too. So hope you guys have learned something about self-care with us. Many more emotional talks to come.
A party that's very much in line with our values.
Absolutely. All right. Bye, guys.